Hello, my name is Elaine. At my father's 70th birthday party, in front of 80 guests, my brother stood up and told everyone I wasn't real family anymore. My mother nodded along, then added, loud enough for the whole tent to hear, "Divorce means you're out. That's how it works." And my 8-year-old daughter was sitting right there. She heard every word. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was finding out they'd been planning to erase me for months, quietly, legally, behind my back. So I pulled out one document, just one, and the room went dead silent. But here's what I want you to think about. What kind of family rehearses your removal like a board meeting? And what would you do if the people who raised you decided your divorce meant you no longer deserved to exist in their story? The invitation arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at my drafting table, halfway through a residential redesign for a couple in Burlington, when my phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Arthur Calloway's 70th A Celebration of Legacy. No personal note. No "Hey Elaine, hope you can make it." Just a generic evite with a stock photo of champagne glasses and a font that looked like it belonged on a real estate brochure. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I called my brother. Marcus picked up on the first ring, which should have been my first warning. He never picks up on the first ring. "Lainey, I was literally about to call you. I got Dad's birthday invite," I said. "It didn't have my name anywhere on it." "Oh, that." He laughed, easy and unbothered. "Hannah set it up through some template thing. You know how those apps glitch. Don't read into it." I wanted to believe him. I really did. "Is it going to be a big thing?" "Just family and some friends. Casual. Mom's handling the food. Dad doesn't even know half the guest list." He paused, and his voice softened into that warm, conspiratorial tone he'd perfected over 3 decades. "It would mean a lot if you came, Lainey. Seriously. Lily too. Dad's been asking about her." That last part got me. Not because I believed it entirely, but because my daughter hadn't seen her grandfather in almost a year, and part of me, the part that still flinched when I thought about holidays we used to share, I wanted to give her the chance. So I said yes. That Saturday morning, I loaded the car before Lily was even fully awake. She climbed into the back seat with her stuffed rabbit and a book about planets, her brown hair still messy from sleep. My cat, Biscuit, watched us from the porch with the resigned look of an animal who knew he'd have the house to himself. "Are we going to Grandpa's?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "We are. Will there be cake?" "I'm sure there will be." She smiled and went back to her book. I wished I could borrow that simplicity, the ability to walk into a room full of people and only wonder about cake. The drive from Montpelier to my parents' place outside Albany took about 3 hours. I spent most of it running through scenarios in my head, the way you do when your body already knows something your brain refuses to accept. I told myself it would be fine. Just a birthday. Just a party. Just family. The house sat at the end of a tree-lined road, in a neighborhood that looked like it had been designed by a committee obsessed with symmetry. Every lawn trimmed to the same height. Every mailbox the same shade of black. My parents had lived there for 22 years, and somehow the place never felt like it belonged to actual people. There were cars everywhere. I counted at least 40 before I stopped. "Casual," Marcus had said. Right. We parked 3 houses down and walked up the sidewalk. Lily held my hand and pointed at the balloon arch over the front gate. "That's a lot of balloons for just a birthday." "Your uncle likes to go big," I said. The backyard had been transformed. White tents, string lights, rented tables with linen cloths. A banner stretched across the back fence reading Arthur Calloway, 70 years of building legacy. There was a photo timeline on a display board near the entrance, pictures arranged by decade. I scanned them as we walked past. Dad in the Navy. Dad and Mom's wedding. Marcus's Little League games. Marcus's college graduation. Marcus and Hannah's wedding. Their kids' christenings. I wasn't in a single one. Lily noticed before I did. "Mommy, where are you?" "Maybe they're on the other side," I said, guiding her forward. But I'd already looked. Both sides. Every photo. Not one image of me. Not my high school graduation. Not my wedding. Not Lily's birth. Nothing. A woman at the check-in table handed me a name tag. It said, "Guest Table 9. "I'm Elaine," I said. "Arthur's daughter." She blinked, glanced at her clipboard. I'm sorry. I just have you listed under general guests. Of course she did. I stuck the tag in my purse and walked Lily toward the food table. She grabbed a juice box and wandered toward a group of kids playing near the swing set. I watched her go, then turned to scan the crowd. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors. People I hadn't seen in years. People who used to pinch my cheeks and call me Little Laney. None of them looked up. None of them waved. I found my mother near the dessert station, arranging cupcakes with the focus of a surgeon. She wore a lavender dress and a pearl necklace I'd given her for Mother's Day 6 years ago. That detail hit harder than I expected. Hi, Mom. She looked up, eyes scanning me briefly. Oh, you made it. Her tone was the same one she used when the delivery driver showed up late, mildly inconvenienced. I brought Lily. That's nice. She turned back to the cupcakes. Make sure she doesn't run near the speakers. Marcus rented a good sound system. I stood there for a moment, waiting for something more. A hug. A question about the drive. Anything. She repositioned a cupcake that was already perfectly centered. I walked away. The afternoon crawled. I sat at table 9, which was pressed against the back fence near the recycling bins. The table seated 8. 4 of the chairs were empty. The others were occupied by people I'd never met, friends of Hannah's mother, who spent the entire meal talking about a cruise they'd taken to Bermuda. Lily sat beside me, quiet now, picking at her potato salad. Mommy, why aren't we sitting with Grandpa? There wasn't enough room at his table, I said. She accepted that. 8-year-olds are generous with their trust. The speeches started around 5 o'clock. Marcus walked to the small stage they'd set up near the oak tree, microphone in hand, looking every bit the golden sun in his pressed linen shirt and easy grin. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about Dad's work ethic, his sacrifices, the values he'd passed down. He told a story about learning to fish at Lake George when he was 9. The crowd laughed. He talked about legacy, about family as a fortress. Then his eyes drifted toward my table. You know, legacy isn't just about blood, he said, his voice shifting to something rehearsed, polished. It's about commitment. It's about showing up, staying, building. Some people choose to leave. Some people walk away from this family and think they can come back when it's convenient. The air changed. I felt it before I understood it. Heads turning, eyes landing. And I think Dad would agree, Marcus continued, glancing at our father, who sat in a cushioned chair at the front table with a blanket over his knees. Family means the people who stayed, not the ones who signed papers and moved to another state. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. 80 people knew exactly who he was talking about. I sat very still, my fingers pressed against the edge of the table hard enough that my knuckles went white. Lily looked up at me with a confused crease between her eyebrows. Is Uncle Marcus talking about us? Before I could answer, my mother rose from her seat. She walked to the microphone like she'd been waiting for this moment, and maybe she had. She smiled at the crowd, warm, practiced, the smile of a woman who had hosted PTA meetings and church brunches for 3 decades. I just want to add, she said, her voice carrying across the yard like a church bell, that Arthur and I are so proud of the family we've built. The real family. The ones who stayed. The ones who didn't break their vows and run. She paused, glanced at me, then back at the crowd. Divorce means you're out. That's how it works. You don't get to keep the name and the benefits without the commitment. Silence. Then a few nods. A couple of murmurs that sounded like agreement. My daughter was staring at her plate. Her juice box was untouched. Her hands were in her lap, fingers twisted together. She didn't cry. She just got very, very small. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not cracked, not bent, broke. Clean and complete, like a bone snapping under too much weight. But it wasn't a collapse. It was a severance. I stood up slowly. Every eye shifted to me. The murmur stopped. Lily, I said, keeping my voice level. Get your things. We're leaving. Marcus leaned into the microphone. See? That's what she does. She leaves. I looked at him, then at my mother, then at my father, who sat in his chair and said nothing. He hadn't said a word all afternoon. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. I'd assumed it was emotion. Now I wasn't sure it was anything at all. Lily, let's go. I extended my hand. She took it. We walked across the yard. No one stopped us. No one stood up. One cousin, Beth, looked like she wanted to say something, but glanced at Marcus and stayed seated. A neighbor I vaguely recognized whispered to the woman beside her. Well, she did leave the family. The gravel crunched under our shoes. Lily's small hand gripped mine so tightly I could feel her pulse. We reached the car. I buckled her in, walked around to the driver's side, sat down, and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed, counted to 10, and started the engine. Lily's voice came from the back seat, small and careful. Mommy? Am I not real family? I looked at her in the rear-view mirror, her brown eyes, wide and serious, searching my face for an answer she could hold on to. You are the most real thing in my life, I said. And don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise. She nodded slowly, then hugged her rabbit and looked out the window. Halfway home, after Lily had fallen asleep with her cheek pressed against the window, I pulled into a rest stop and picked up my phone. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I scrolled through my contacts and tapped a name I hadn't called in almost a year. Grace Whitfield, estate attorney, old college friend, sharp enough to cut glass. She picked up after 3 rings. Elaine? It's been a while. I need help, I said. My family is trying to cut me out of everything, and I think there's something wrong with my father. She didn't hesitate. Tell me everything. I talked for 20 minutes. About the party, about Marcus's speech, about my mother's declaration, and then about the things that had been nagging me for months. The way Dad's eyes seemed vacant the last few times I'd visited, the fact that Marcus had suddenly become power of attorney without anyone consulting me, the property transfers I'd glimpsed on a county records search 3 months ago when I was curious about the tax assessment on my parents' house. Grace was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "How soon can you get me copies of those records?" "Tonight," I said. "Good. Because if what you're describing is accurate, this isn't just a family dispute. This could be financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." I ended the call and sat in the silence of the car, the only sound Lily's soft breathing and the hum of trucks passing on the highway. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look broken. I looked awake. By Sunday morning, I had the documents spread across my kitchen table like a war map. Lily was at her friend Mackenzie's house for a playdate, and I'd told the mom I might be a few hours late picking her up. She said no problem. I owed her for that. The county records confirmed what I'd suspected. 6 months ago, the deed to my parents' house had been transferred into Marcus and Hannah's names. The paperwork listed Dad as the grantor. The signature was shaky, barely legible. I compared it to a birthday card Dad had sent Lily 2 years ago. The handwriting wasn't even close. 2 years ago, his letters were firm, deliberate. The signature on the deed looked like it had been written by a hand that didn't know where it was going. There was more. A second property, the lake house in the Adirondacks, the one our grandfather had built in the 60s, and left to both Marcus and me equally, had also been transferred. This time solely to Marcus's LLC, Callaway Holdings. The date was 4 months ago. I was never notified. Never consulted. The document listed a witness I didn't recognize and a notary whose license, according to a quick state database search, had been suspended the year before. I sat back in my chair and pressed my palms against my eyes. This wasn't just disrespect. This wasn't just favoritism. This was theft, executed quietly while my father's mind was slipping, and nobody told me. I called Grace. "It's worse than I thought," I said, and walked her through every document. She exhaled slowly. "Elaine, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. When was the last time your father had a cognitive evaluation?" "I don't know. Mom handles all his medical stuff. She doesn't tell me anything. That's the problem. If he's been declared competent, these transfers might hold. But if there's evidence of cognitive decline before the signing dates, every one of these documents becomes legally suspect. How do I find out? You request his medical records. You have standing as his daughter, and if they refuse, we petition the court." I spent the rest of the day building a timeline. Every financial document I could find, every email, every text. I pulled up old family group chat messages where Marcus casually mentioned handling Dad's paperwork, and Mom replied with a thumbs up emoji. I found a text from Hannah to Marcus that he'd accidentally forwarded to the family thread 8 months ago before quickly deleting it. I'd screenshot it at the time out of instinct. It read, "Just make sure she doesn't find out about the transfers until it's done. By then, it won't matter." I stared at that screenshot for a long time. Then I saved it to 3 different locations. Monday morning, I drafted a formal request for Dad's medical records from his primary care physician. I also filed a request with the county clerk's office for a full chain of title report on both properties. And I placed a call to Adult Protective Services. The woman on the phone was calm and professional. She asked me a series of questions about my father's living situation, his cognitive state, who held power of attorney, and whether I had reason to believe financial decisions were being made without his informed consent. I answered each one carefully, without exaggeration, without emotion. "We'll open an inquiry," she said. "Someone from our office will conduct a wellness check within the next 10 days. I thanked her and hung up. That evening, Marcus called. His voice was different. Tight, controlled. "I heard you've been making calls." "I have." "You need to stop. You're embarrassing the family." I leaned against the kitchen counter and spoke clearly. "Marcus, you transferred Dad's house into your name, using a signature that doesn't match his handwriting. You took the lake house through an LLC without notifying me. And you did it while his mental state was declining." Silence. "I have the documents," I continued. "I have the texts. I have the timeline. So when you say, 'I'm embarrassing the family,' I want you to think very carefully about which one of us should actually be embarrassed." He hung up without a word. The medical records arrived Thursday. Grace called me 20 minutes after I forwarded them. Her voice was measured, but I could hear the edge underneath. His doctor noted signs of early-stage dementia 14 months ago, recommended a full neurological workup. There's no record it was ever completed. 14 months ago, I repeated. The first property transfer was 8 months ago. Exactly. Which means every legal document signed after that initial diagnosis is potentially voidable. If he didn't have the cognitive capacity to understand what he was signing, those transfers aren't just questionable, they're fraudulent. I closed my eyes. What do we do? We file. I'll prepare the petition to contest both property transfers. I'm also flagging this for the State Attorney General's office. The use of a suspended notary alone is enough to trigger an investigation. And Dad? The court can order a competency evaluation. If it confirms what his medical records suggest, a guardian ad litem will be appointed to protect his interests. That might end up being you, Elaine. If you want it. I thought about the man who sat in that cushioned chair at the party, silent, eyes unfocused, while his son told 80 people that his daughter wasn't family. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't even looked at me. But he also might not have understood what was happening. And that, somehow, hurt more than anything Marcus or my mother had said. "I want it," I said. The following week moved fast. Grace filed the petition on Monday. By Wednesday, a forensic accountant she'd brought in had traced over $90,000 in withdrawals from my father's retirement accounts over the past year, all transferred to an account held jointly by Marcus and Hannah. Some were labeled household expenses. Others had no description at all. Adult Protective Services conducted their wellness check on Thursday. I wasn't there, but Grace received a copy of the preliminary findings. Dad was underweight. His medication schedule was inconsistent. The home, while clean, showed signs that his daily needs were being managed minimally. The caseworker noted that when asked who handled his finances, he became confused and said, "I think my son, but I can't remember signing anything." I read that line 3 times. Friday afternoon, I received a call from a reporter at the Albany Times-Union. She said she'd received a tip about a contested property case involving possible elder financial abuse. She asked if I'd comment. "Not yet," I said, "but keep my number." Marcus's response came Saturday morning, not as a phone call, but as a letter from his attorney. It accused me of malicious interference with family estate planning and threatened a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress. It also claimed that Dad had voluntarily signed all documents with full understanding and that my claims were motivated by personal bitterness following her estrangement from the family. I read the letter at the kitchen table, while Lily ate scrambled eggs beside me. She was humming a song from school. Something about seasons changing. I folded the letter, placed it in the file I'd started keeping in a locked drawer, and took a sip of my coffee. "Mommy, are you okay?" Lily asked. "I'm good, sweetheart. You have your thinking face on." I smiled. "I do. But it's a good kind of thinking." Grace responded to their attorney within 48 hours. Her reply was 5 pages long and included the medical records, the forensic accounting summary, the screenshot of Hannah's text, and the suspended notary's license status. She ended with a single paragraph suggesting that her client would welcome an opportunity to resolve this privately, but was fully prepared for a public proceeding. The counter-threat vanished overnight. No response, no follow-up letter, just silence. 2 weeks later, the court granted a temporary injunction freezing both property transfers, pending a full competency hearing. The judge also ordered a neurological evaluation of my father to be conducted by an independent specialist within 30 days. The evaluation confirmed what the records had suggested. Early to moderate stage dementia. Significant impairment in executive function and decision-making. The specialist's report stated clearly that in his professional opinion, Arthur Calloway lacked the cognitive capacity to execute legal documents at the time the transfers were signed. The transfers were voided. The lake house was restored to joint ownership, mine and Marcus's, as our grandfather had intended. The family home was placed under a court-appointed fiduciary, pending resolution of the guardianship question. The state attorney general opened a formal investigation into Marcus and Hannah's financial conduct. The forensic accountant's findings were forwarded to the IRS. Adult Protective Services upgraded their case to active monitoring. Marcus didn't post about it, didn't go live, didn't give interviews, but Hannah scrubbed their social media clean in one afternoon. Every family photo, every blessed life caption, every holiday post, gone. My mother called once. Her voice was thin, brittle, nothing like the woman who'd stood at that microphone. "You've destroyed this family, Elaine." I held the phone and let those words sit in the air. Then I said, "No, Mom. I just stopped pretending it was one." She hung up. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel bitterness. I felt clear. The guardianship hearing was held on a Tuesday in September. The courtroom was small, quiet. Marcus and Hannah sat on one side. I sat on the other with Grace. My mother was in the gallery, clutching her purse like a lifeline. The judge reviewed the medical evidence, the financial records, the APS report. He asked Marcus directly whether he'd been aware of the dementia diagnosis before executing the property transfers. Marcus said no. The judge then entered into evidence the medical record showing that the diagnosis had been sent to the family's shared patient portal, which Marcus had accessed 3 times in the month following the diagnosis. Marcus's attorney asked for a recess. It was denied. The court appointed me as Dad's legal guardian. The fiduciary would continue overseeing his finances. Marcus was ordered to repay the withdrawn funds within 12 months or face civil penalties. After the hearing, I walked to the parking lot alone. The air was cool for September. Leaves were just starting to turn. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, and breathed. My phone buzzed. A text from Beth, the cousin who'd stayed silent at the party. "I should have stood up that day. I'm sorry. What you did took more courage than anyone in this family has ever had." I read it twice. Then I typed back, "Thank you. That means more than you know." I didn't move back to Albany. I didn't take over the family home. I drove back to Vermont, picked up Lily from school, and made spaghetti for dinner. She told me about a science project on the solar system and asked if Pluto was still a planet. I told her some things change, but that doesn't make them less important. That night, after she was asleep, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees and a mug of tea going cold beside me. Biscuit curled at my feet, purring. The mountains were dark outlines against a sky full of stars. I thought about the woman who'd driven to that party 3 months ago, the one who still hoped her name tag might say daughter instead of guest table 9. She felt far away now, not gone, just outgrown. In the weeks that followed, I started something small. A monthly dinner at my house for women in the community who were going through custody battles, divorces, family estrangements. No agenda. No formal program. Just a table, good food, and the understanding that you don't have to explain why you left. You just have to know you were right to. Lily helped me set the table every time. She'd fold the napkins into little triangles and place a small card at each seat that said, "Welcome, you belong here." She came up with that on her own. I visited Dad once, at the assisted living facility the court had placed him in. It was clean, well-staffed, quiet. He was sitting by a window when I walked in, looking at the garden outside. He turned when he heard my footsteps and studied my face for a long moment. "Elaine?" he said, uncertain. "Hi, Dad." He looked at me like he was trying to remember something important, but couldn't quite reach it. Then he said, "Did I do something wrong?" I sat beside him. I didn't answer. I just sat there, in the silence, in the space between what he'd done and what he could no longer remember. After a while, he turned back to the window and watched a bird hop along the garden wall. I left without saying goodbye. Not out of cruelty, out of mercy for both of us. On the drive home, Lily called from the back seat. "Mommy? Is Grandpa sad?" "I think he's somewhere between sad and forgetting," I said. She thought about that. "That sounds lonely." "It is. Can we send him a drawing?" I looked at her in the mirror. Brown eyes, serious and kind, so much braver than anyone in my family had ever taught her to be. "Yeah," I said. "We can do that." That night, I opened my journal and wrote a single line. I didn't tear them down. I just stopped holding them up. There was no bitterness in the ink. Just the quiet scratch of a pen on paper and the steady breathing of a little girl asleep down the hall who would never, ever have to wonder if she belonged. Sometimes strength isn't loud. It isn't dramatic or cinematic or wrapped in a speech that goes viral. Sometimes it's one document, one phone call, one decision to stop pretending that silence means peace. My family tried to erase me. They told 80 people I didn't count. They took what wasn't theirs and called it legacy. But legacy isn't what you take. It's what you build when no one's watching. And right now, in a small house in Vermont, there's a table set for women who were told they didn't belong, napkins folded into triangles by an 8-year-old who believes everyone deserves a seat. That's my legacy. What would you do if the people who raised you decided you no longer counted? If this story made you feel something, leave a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories. I read every single comment, and your words keep these stories coming. I'll see you in the next one.